All right, good morning, everyone. We're back at Tanya. Today we begin chapter 48 of Tanya, page 613. What a great number, just especially for this week, the week of Shavuos. So I just want to talk briefly about Shavuos and how everything kind of ties in what we're learning. Where, in a sense, Shavuos or Shavuot is probably the least popular or known holiday. People know Yom Kippur, people know Hanukkah, people know Pesach, people heard of Sukkot. Shavuot is, if we do a survey, I'm sure it'll be on the lower rank. And it's always amazed me because Shavuot, in a sense, is the easiest holiday to observe. So if you want to observe all the holidays, the most simple one is Shavuot. All the other holidays, you gotta do something. For example, Yom Kippur, you gotta fast. Sukkot, you gotta build the sukkah and sit outside. Right? Pesach, you gotta clean out your house. Shavuot, what do you gotta do on Shavuot? Eat cheesecake. And why Shavuot such a easy holiday yet not so popular? And why is that Shavuot is so? What does it have to do with the cheesecake? I'm not going to go into the cheesecake today so much, but I wanted to reflect. Good morning, Bella.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sorry for being late.
That's okay.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rita. I wasn't sure if you're on or not. Good to hear your voice. And Alex is too.
Yes, we
Fantastic.
here.
Fantastic. So every holiday we have is focused on something that we get out of we get out of it, so to speak. Like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's about us getting a good year. And Sukkot, it's celebrating that relationship. Hanukkah, the miracles. Purim, again, the miracle survival. Pesach, the day we became free people. Shavuos is really a holiday to express our love for Hashem, express the relationship that Hashem has invited us and given us as at Sinai by giving the Torah. But we're learning now here in these chapters that we went from deep meditations to more of a reflective response. If we just reflect the concept, how much Hashem loves us, how much Hashem wants to be close to us and invites us into his inner chambers without any much. You don't have to achieve at any certain spiritual level. He's always there to welcome us and waiting for us and brings us to into his deepest inner chamber, so to speak, because he deeply loves us. In a sense, in a relationship, you always know, you can sense the intensity of the love. And typically we want to be the one to give more love than the other party. It's kind of when you love each other, it's kind of who can express or give the love over stronger. Hashem's love to us is way, way, way infinitely stronger than how we love Hashem. And that's a challenge because we're not so conscious of the love that Hashem has for us. So we reflect how Hashem loves us so strongly. And as a return, I want to love Hashem as well, that he accepts me for who I am. But is the key, is such a powerful entry to feel connected, and the ability to connect to Hashem that helps us in our day-to-day life. That's what we learned in Tanya. But the setup of all this happened when the Jews came to Sinai and received the Torah. That was the big day. And this day of Shavuos that we celebrate every year is to express that love we have for Hashem by embracing the relationship, to make the relationship deeper. So if you want to know what Shavuos, what is the definition of the holiday of Shavuos? Of course, it comes with the festivals of bringing the first fruits and And that type of sacrifice they would bring, or offering they would bring in the temple. But the key Shavuos, what we call Shavuos service, or my contribution, or my approach of Shavuos is to express our gratitude of the greatest gift that God has given us, the gift of Torah, which by definition is that God has allowed us in the most intimate way to be close to Hashem, to celebrate that relationship. So Shavuos is our wedding day, where we got married to the Torah. And how do we keep the marriage up? By studying Torah, by doing the mitzvahs, as we learned last week. And those and the ability to go out of our personal Egypt every single day, as we learned last week. So Shavuos gives us this very powerful gift, and more Shavuos we have the ability to express it, because when you go on when you're in marriage, you have to express your love. How do you express your love? So there's anniversaries, right? There's anniversaries. There's daily expressions. The anniversary is typically your big one, right? So typically the husband has a harder time than the wife many times to express the love. Like this couple who the husband asked his wife, "Tell me, honey, what's the password to the computer?" She said, "It's our anniversary date." But the idea is really that the Shavuos is like the anniversary date. An anniversary, we have that great idea. All right, and that's why we eat dairy products, for example. Even if you cannot eat dairy products, you don't have to. It's not a mitzvah to eat dairy products on Shavuos. Nowhere does it say in the Torah, "Thou shalt eat cheesecake on Shavuos." It's more of a minhag, a custom. And one of the many reasons, one of the reasons is, if you look in the newly printed Shalom Times, if you got it in your mailbox already, you'll see that I think the last page has the recipe for cheesecake. There has a bunch of reasons why no. But one of the most beautiful explanation is milk is life. Milk is life, and milk is like a child when born needs to have milk. Torah is our life. Torah is our life source, life force, and it nurtures us. Let's go into this next chapter, chapter 48, page 613. In a sense, the title is a very Kabbalistic title, "The Paradox of the Tzimtzum." So the word tzimtzum is probably one of the most discussed topic in Kabbalah. So I want to just give you some warnings. Do not despair. This chapter is not to give us very abstract concepts of Kabbalah, but rather it continues in the ideas that this is no longer we are focusing so much on deep meditation, but matter on what we call reflection points. If we reflect on a certain concept, not on such a deep level, it should arouse in us a reflective or responsive love to Hashem. So what's tzimtzum? I'm going to give this before we start in a recap. What is tzimtzum? So when we're talking about God's infinite light and God creating the universe, there was a conflict. The conflict is that something that is of infinite nature, the nature of infinite, is such a word. The nature of infinity is it doesn't relate or is on the same plane than anything that is finite per se. Right? Because if it's finite, then it's not infinite, and if it's infinite, then it's not finite. Infinity and finite cannot coexist in the same level. So, in order for Hashem, who is infinite, to create something that is limited, that is finite, like the universe, like human beings, like animals. God, there was a conflict, because how can something infinite create something that's finite that contradicts, in a sense, the infinity? You can say, well, there's a simple answer to that. God created two different realities, so to speak. God created a reality called infinity. God created a reality called finite. And that is the mistake sometimes we do, that we think that God is so infinite that he has no relationship to this finite world. So God kind of, yes, had a spin-off. Let the universe, let there be light, let there be the spin-off of Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, whatever you want to call it. And then this infinite light removed itself from creation and is no longer intimately involved. And that's the notion that I can believe there's a God, but God is far removed from the universe. It has nothing to do on a day-to-day or on the moment-to-moment engagement what happens in this world. Not only he doesn't, he cannot. It will be a contradiction to infinity. So this is nothing new to us. We've learned this before. So what transpired was that God desired a universe that is limited. God desired to create people and humans that have freedom of choice. In order for it to happen, God had to give the ability, the room for something finite to exist, even within the infinite reality. And how was that done? That God instituted or introduced the concept of tzimtzum. The tzimtzum in English means contraction. It means concealment. Letzamtzem in Hebrew plainly means to narrow down. Contraction is probably a better word, or concealment, where the analogy is like a filter. So you have the intensity that exists and is unchangeable, but it is for the recipient. In order for the recipient to be able to coexist, so to speak, God introduced a filter called tzimtzum that allows for a different being to exist, but thinking that they actually exist outside of the infinite light. So the analogy of the sun, for example. So the sun is extremely intense. In order for the sun to, now we know that we need to have the sunlight to exist, right? If there will be no sunlight, nothing will grow, life will the sun gives a big component to life on Earth. However, we know how delicate it is, that there has to be the balance of the intensity and the ability not to be too strong. And there are certain filters around the sun, so to speak, right, that allow for the sunlight to penetrate to that we as recipients can absorb it and benefit from it. Through this process of this filter that surrounds that protects the sunlight from the universe, has that affected the sun in its core, in its own being? No. The filter is only for the recipient to have the ability to absorb something out of it, but it hasn't changed anything in its core. So tzimtzum is basically God's ability, God's filter system, that we as recipients can receive godly's light, which means which by definition in God, as we say in Tehillim, Ani Hashem lo shnisi, or one of the prophets. Hashem says, I have never changed. Hashem has never changed, and I will never change, because in his infinite life, nothing changed. It's just the tzimtzum filter that he activated. But why did he do all this? This is basically the idea of this chapter, is why did he do this tzimtzum? Because he wants a relationship. He wants to create us humans, to be able to connect to him. So if you just think about it, God went out of his comfort zone, if you can say that, so to speak, right? To create a tzimtzum, so he can create us. For what purpose? Because he wants a relation with us. That is such a beautiful expression of his care and love, that he wants a relation with me. So as a response, I know now that I'm not insignificant. I am actually important to Hashem, and that makes me feel very, very loved. And as return, I want to love Hashem even stronger. Example of tzimtzum that we can more relate to is and it's brought a lot down in specific teaching, is a teacher to its students, right? So as teachers, a teacher that teaches a certain subject, that in his mind, he's way above his students. But if he would just give over everything that is in his mind, that he knows about this subject, to his students, with just the way he perceives it completely, without any downgrade, so to speak, without filtering it down to the level of the students will not understand anything. So what the teacher has to do, he has to litzamtzem, he has to do a tzimtzum in his mind, to narrow, to contract the ideas, to make it accessible for the students to absorb. So did the idea in himself, has that been affected in any way? Not really, not at all. It's just that in order for him to share that, he has to narrow it down for the recipient. That's what tzimtzum is about. So a teacher who walks into his class and says, I'm going to teach the way I learn it, the way I perceive it, without any filtration, he's not a teacher. He doesn't care about his students. So the stronger, in a sense, the teacher has the ability to filter his ideas so the students can understand his depth, and slowly he can have the ability to filter less, because he will elevate his students. That is a real teacher. That's a teacher who cares and loves his students. So similar with Hashem. By the way, that also happens we learned in Tanya earlier, when we talked about the three garments of the soul, the way the soul expresses itself. We talked in Tanya about thought, speech, and action. So between thoughts and speech, when we think of an idea and the way we speak, speaking is really an act of tzimtzum. For me to articulate words that are in my brain, I need to filter down so that I can articulate them. The expression, he speaks his mind freely, right? Right? And you have no idea what he's saying. And the person himself doesn't know what he's saying, because they have not activated something tzimtzum, because the act of speech is to communicate to somebody outside of yourself. And we learned also that actually the tzimtzum process helps develop a deep idea, which is not really connected right now, but now we understand why God created the universe with what? With speech. Hashem created the world with 10 different utterings, it says, right? Asara mamoris, the 10 sayings. Number 1, let there be light. God said, let there be light. Why? This Torah described God's creation with speech. Why does God need speech to create the world? God can say, I think about the world and it came to being. Obviously, it's not physical speech. The Torah speaks in the language of man to give us the ability to know what it means that God spoke and the world came into being. What would be the other word for speech in creation? No? Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum. That's Tzimtzum. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created, right? Bara Elokim as a Shemayim as a earth, heaven and earth. The world was in chaos, right? There was this chaos. And the spirit of Hashem was surfacing over the universe. First verses of the Torah. That was before God spoke. It doesn't say God created through speech. God, Bereshit, in the beginning, God created the world. It will say with what? Then God said, Yehi or, let there be light. So what is that transition? It went from one level of tzimtzum to a more intense level of tzimtzum. So in Kabbalah, and I'm going off track, which is the idea. Bereshit bara Elokim. What's Bereshit? Beginning. Beginning is what? So we learned in one of the chapters of Tanya that beginning, when we talk about Bereshit, beginning refers to Chachma. Chachma is the first level of intellect, right? The creative ideas that we have. So Hashem created the world with Chachma, with His wisdom. Bereshit bara Elokim. The whole world came into being. But it was still chaotic because it was too intense. The light, even Chachma is already a tzimtzum. But that's not enough to create actually a detailed, finite universe. So it was still a chaotic situation, which we call in Kabbalah we call it the Big Bang, the Big Bang theory, right? Where there was this explosion of the intensity of the light, and then God created a further tzimtzum, which is through speech, which is let there be light. Just to give idea that God went in a long process to make this all work together. That's really the idea here. Bella, a bunch of questions. Go ahead.
My question was about Keter. Keter is not God, but it's above Choch. So how you explain it?
So so Keter is the crown.
Yeah, I know it's
crown.
above human. I understand.
It transcends intellect. So if I would put Keter together with what we learned in Tanya again, with the Ratzon, which is the will and the pleasure, power of will and power of pleasure. So we know the power of willpower and pleasure is deeper than intellect. In order for me to come up with an idea, there has to first be a willpower that I would want to come up with an idea. People just don't wake up in the morning and popping up with an idea. There has to be a drive of innovation. There's be a drive. I want to have an idea. So the drive, the power that we have, the yearning or the pleasure of coming up with something, coming up with Chachma, comes from Keser, which is deeper, which is actually a point which we would consider the power of infinity. How can we humans come up with such an innovative ideas? It comes from the power of infinity. That God gave us access, and that's the level of Keser. It's not God Himself, but it's the power that God has given us. When we said God created in His image, kind of that's where it all stems from. The essence of our soul rests mostly in Keser.
One more question, quick.
Yes.
We say God is infinite.
Yeah.
But God also started from somewhere. That point of creation of God. Huh?
Who created God,
chaos.
right? Who created God? $1 million question.
I know. And different people, Kabbalists explain it, but how Hasidim explain?
The first of all, Hasidim don't contradict Kabbalah. What is
They
Kabbalah?
don't contradict, but they have different angles sometimes.
Okay. And how does Kabbalah explain it?
I read from one very reliable person that I respect that
Yeah.
God is a point of pressure out of that chaos that created that starting point.
Say that one more time. Sorry. The God is what?
It's a point of pressure. It's a dot that was created out of chaos.
As?
Dot, D-O-T.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you think, but that's what I would like to hear.
See,
If this is not the point, I don't want to change
no,
the.
I just want to throw something back, and that's where it really it's we are dealing with things the way we perceive things, the way we look at things, we think of things, right? So we think it's very flawed from the get-go, because we think of God some kind of being. And if it's some kind of being, then if it's in being, then something else have to make it into existence. The concept of God is so beyond our capacity to understand. What we understand is just certain terminologies, how we humans perceive things. And in perception, there always has to be kind of a cause and effect, right? So so God created the world, or who created the tree? This, and the seed, and who created the seed? It has to always go back to some beginning, but we have a hard time accepting that God is the beginning of all beginning, because then it means, okay, so but there's got to be something above that, versus there is nothing above that, because this is not a territory that we can even comprehend.
So there wasn't anything beyond God, before God, nothing.
It's flawed to say that, even that there was something before God. If God is everything, and everything is only because of God, then there's nothing before anything. But and that's so hard to wrap our brain around.
It's very hard to grasp.
We're looking in terms of linear, time. Like, okay, so God exists for billions of years. So who was around 100 billions of years? And okay, so so that's where we have to kind of we need to filter our own perception of God to realize that we're talking about something completely on a different level that is not even on the same plane. And giving an answer to such a question actually limits the whole concept of God.
So we could start with a human question. What was first, eggs or chicken?
We're going to call mitzvah for that one. All right.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No problem. Let's start reading a bit. So we're on page 613, chapter 48. The paradox of the Tzimtzum. Section 1, why diminishment of God's light is crucial. So chapter 48 continues a series of discussions extending from chapter 46 to chapter 49 related to the subject of mirroring God's love. In chapter 46, we learn that the heart naturally instinctively mirrors love. Space reflects space in water, so the heart of man to man. Tanya has offered us various reflection of God's love for us, so that our hearts might mirror back the love to Him. Chapter 46, we consider how God's love shown to us at the exodus from Egypt was like a great king lifting a lofty man of the dirt, bringing him to the palace, and showering him with hugs and kisses. In chapter 47, we learn how spiritually speaking the exodus reverend every day, since it represents the ongoing opportunity gifted to us from God for personal liberation. This chapter will discuss another dimension of God's love for us, how He made the effort, so to speak, to diminish it, infinite light, and enable us to exist. But again, when He says effort, right, to God there's nothing that's really effort. But he refers to we look at it as going kind of out of his comfort zone. or the way Hashem operates regularly. So now, when an intelligent person will contemplate the greatness of the blessed infinite one, and as this name suggested, there is no end, finality, or limit whatsoever to the light and energy emerging from him. Intelligent person will realize that a huge gap separates an infinite God from the finite world. Before continuing our discussion, Tanya briefly clarifies an important point regarding this metaphor of God's light, which is commonly used in Kabbalistic work. This light emerging through his non-composite which will, that is united with his essence and being, in complete unity. The Kabbalists preferred the metaphor of God's light over other terms such as flow and influence, because light stresses a direct connection and continuity with its source. The light is united with his essence and being in complete unity, just as the light which emerges from a bulb is clearly connected with its source, just as a light bulb doesn't choose to emit its light. The term God's light will also send the mistaken impression that God was somehow forced to emit this energy. To correct any such impression, Tanya stresses that God's light emerged intentionally through his non-composite will. So in other words, it's not just by default, God's light shines on us, like we would think of a light bulb. You turn on a light bulb, the light bulb doesn't have a saying in the matter if it's going to emanate light, it's going to shine light or not. The definition of a light bulb, you turn it on, it's going to shine a light. It doesn't have its own will. Here, God's light doesn't shine automatically to everyone. God, in his will, decided to shine it onto us. So now we will return to our main theme, the problem of a finite world emanating from God's infinite light. If the spiritual world has unfolded from the blessed infinite light without any radical diminishment, and the creation of the spiritual physical world would have only followed a sequential cause and effect process. Each phase is relative to the next. This world could not have been created at all in its current limited and finite form. If you start with an infinite light, then diminish it by any percentage, you will still be left with infinity. However, many relative changes you would make, you would never transform the infinite to the finite. And we see that the universe is finite, since a journey from the earth to the firmament takes 500 years, and so too, between each firmament and the one above it, it's so too the thickness of each firmament. So this is a quote from the Talmud. What does that mean? 500 years of journey. While the Talmud stresses the immensity of the universe, it also defines and limits it. A journey of 500 years is certainly a vast one, but it's finite, right? So there's different ideas behind this fascinating Talmud, right? 2,000 years ago, did they know that it's going to take us 500 years to travel to where? To Mars? How long will it take us today to travel to Mars? And what we're referring to here is not Mars, referring to different heavens and stuff like that. So, and we know that even this is a great example. We'll talk about the universe. And we know how the universe seems to be infinite. As much as we continue to explore, explore more with bigger telescope, bigger whatever they call the big satellites. This seems to be completely infinite. Yet we know that it's still finite. But that's just and Talmud refers to more spiritual worlds and spiritual years, so to speak. It doesn't matter. But the point is that even what we would call infinite is, end of the day, it's not infinite. It's still finite. Even if it takes 1,000,000 years to get to the galaxy. Point is, And so the point is, for Hashem to create a finite world, it wasn't enough to let the infinite light shine, and as the distance goes, it diminishes and diminishes and diminishes. Rather, he had to actively create a tzimtzum that goes from level infinite to level finite. And even the world that is coming in the upper chamber of Gan Eden in heaven, where the souls are great so they can dwell, are limited and finite. And the disembodied souls themselves, and it goes without saying, the angels are limited and finite. We know this.
Angels?
Yes. So we see. It's not talking about physical things. Spiritual things also are finite compared to the infinite light. If angels are not infinite, angels are finite spiritual beings. A soul is not infinite, and neshama is not infinite, because then how does it come into you? If it's infinite, how does my soul rest in me? Why is it my soul? If there's so many souls, 600,000 souls or millions of souls, then that's not infinite. So souls are finite in the spiritual realm. He's not talking about Gan Eden as a heaven or as a physical location, but in a spiritual location. So continue. We know this because there's a limit to the comprehension of the blessed infinite light, which shines to them through the limited filter of Chachma, Bina, and Das. And consequently, there's a limit to the pleasure they get from basking in the ray of divine presence and enjoying God's light. So if a soul or an angel would be infinite, then why would there be a limit how much godliness they could comprehend, or how much godliness they can have pleasure from? Because they cannot actually receive pleasure and enjoyment directly from the infinite light, without the sense of independence existence being voided, which will cause them to return to the source in God. The Talmud stresses that souls receive only a ray, what's called a ziv in Hebrew, of the divine presence, indicating that their experience is highly limited and filtered. Two reasons are given for this. Number one, the soul's access this light through comprehension, which is limited. And two, if they were given more light, the individuality would be erased and they would simply dissolve in God. There's nothing then in any of the spiritual or physical world that is truly infinite. In order for God's infinite light to be received by the world, a radical diminishment of the light was necessary, which we'll discuss in the next section. But just to clarify, we all come from infinite. The souls come from Hashem, right? When we say that the soul is an actual part of Hashem, that is true. The source of every soul is an actual part of Hashem. But then, for the soul to have its own individuality, Hashem did a tzimtzum so the soul can exist, so to speak, independently. But the source of the soul is infinite. But if we would not have the tzimtzum, we would never come into being. We'll just become completely dissolved in the infinite light.
So, Rabbi, the death is a part of tzimtzum?
That is well, for sure. When a soul is in the body, that is the biggest tzimtzum for the soul. Yeah. So imagine the soul begins at the infinite level. That's the source of the soul. In order for the soul to become a independent being, so to speak, or like become it, right, the soul of Rita Vayner, it had to go through a tzimtzum. In God's universe, God created a tzimtzum for Rita's Vayner's soul to be created. And then they go look to more tzimtzums and more tzimtzums for it to be born into your parents and become a physical being, the beautiful Rita you are.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So, but our souls in the body is experiencing the greatest tzimtzum. Actually, not necessarily the greatest tzimtzum, but I would say there's the main tzimtzum that happens is from level infinite, from the Or from the infinite light to the finite idea. That's the greatest tzimtzum. then there has to go through many more tzimtzums for it to come into a physical body. When a person passes away, that tzimtzum gets removed, but it remains in its spiritual tzimtzum, which is not a bad thing. On the contrary, it's the tzimtzum of the soul is a gift that Hashem has given, so the soul can sense and feel Hashem. Otherwise, it wouldn't feel Hashem. It would never come to be. So tzimtzum is a gift. Tzimtzum is an expression of Hashem's love for us because He wants a relationship. The problem is when there's too much tzimtzum. When there's too much tzimtzum and we add to the tzimtzum, that's when it gets really problematic. That's why our daily mitzvahs and Torah strips away what I would call the unnecessary tzimtzum. Hashem's presence in the world is also through tzimtzum. Nature in itself is God's tzimtzum in this world, because God concealed His presence. Our job is to uncover, as much as we have the ability with mitzvahs and Torah, to uncover the tzimtzum. Let's do one more section. Section 2, page 16. So now, as for the details of these diminishments, and the house and the what's, here's not the place to elaborate. The Tanya says, here's not the place to elaborate, and he really gives us a full chapter on it. For his level, it's not too elaborate. For us, it's a lot to unpack. The discussion here is practically oriented. Is a practically oriented one. Because remember, all he's doing here in these chapters is trying to give us simple reflection points, not deep meditation. Its aim is demonstrating how God's diminishment were an expression of His love for you, so that you can mirror that love. We won't be carrying out a thorough analysis of the complex and nuanced tzimtzum, the diminishment concept. We need just enough detail to help us fulfill our goal. But generally speaking, and there's books and books that Tanya wrote in different books, not in Tanya, for example. Alter Rebbe has 20 to 30 volumes of Hasidic discourses that discusses tzimtzum. The vast library of Chabad Hasidic philosophy discusses tzimtzum in great influence. So Tanya was written primarily for the Beinoni, if you remember, right? So he doesn't expect us to know all of this, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't explore it. But we're definitely getting a good taste of it. But generally speaking, the diminishment are hiding in the consumer of God's light and energy flow, so that the infinite light shouldn't flow into and properly illuminate the lower worlds. Purpose of diminishment was to make your existence possible. It's a restraint out of love on God's part. He held back His light from you so that it would not overwhelm and erase you. Right? So if I have to go to the simple analogy of the student, of the teacher, think of the teacher in your life that gave you ability to comprehend, that made you feel that it gave you a gift of understanding something, right? Think about the one teacher in your life, and knowing that he or she did that was a true act of love, because it took a lot of time. She sat with you and explained to you again because they cared for you. She used a lot of tzimtzum because she restrained herself for your purpose. So now I'm switching from he to she, because typically it's a woman who has more patience than men. But that's how it goes. But if you think about Hashem, how he restrained himself, and restrained the love to give us access to Him, that is the greatest act of love, so to speak. So continue to remember, though, God did not diminish His light completely, because some light must flow and become enmeshed in the lower worlds to power them to be something from nothing. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist at all. but just a tiny, minuscule amount of light and energy is necessary for this to create a process, just enough light so that the lower worlds can exist in a limited finite form. We need to have some light energy from God, otherwise the world wouldn't exist. But it must be radically diminished light so to make finite existence possible. Tanya now elaborates upon how minuscule the diminished light really is. And this radically diminished light is a very small glimmer of light and is literally considered zero in comparison to its source. Unlimited, infinite light, and there's no relative value of comparison between them at all. Because mathematically, the term relative, the relative value has a straightforward meaning. Where, for example, the number 1 has a relative value to the number 1 million. It being a 1 millionth part of it. But compared to something that is infinite, a beyond number, it has no relative value at all mathematically. That even a million or 100 million compared to infinity isn't even 1 million or 100 millionths of infinity. Rather, it's literally considered zero. So, yes, the idea is that between finite and infinite, there's really nothing relative. You can say, what's closer to the number infinity? A million or a billion? Which number is closer to the number infinity? So most people think infinity is a real crazy number. I can't even get there. So billion must be closer. That's not true. There's no. It's neither of them. To the number infinity, and it's something hard for our brains to wrap around. Million or billion is zero. Means nothing. Because if it does mean something, that means that the infinity is not infinity. So basically, I mean, all that Hashem created this filter. That means that He created a finite light, which has no relative comparison to the infinite light. Although He always had to keep the infinite light in some type of shape to give its life source. It continues, and exactly the same with the minuscule glimmer of God's light enmeshed in the upper and lower worlds, for which the life energy flows to them, which is considered zero in comparison to God's hidden and concealed light, which is infinite. The term hidden and concealed used here in reference to the infinite light could be confusing. After all, you can't actually see any of God's spiritual light, neither the infinite light nor the minuscule and infinite light which reaches the world. So why does Tanya use the term hidden and concealed only in reference to the infinite light? The issue here is not whether the light is visible, rather if it's receivable and compatible with your existence. Because in order for your existence to continue every second, you must receive God's energizing light. So hidden and concealed here means that the light is unavailable to you and incompatible with your existence. But it doesn't mean it's not here. It is here, but it's not available kind of for us to even to relate to. Stop here. My symptom filter doesn't work further. We'll stop here. Continue next week. Because next week it's going to go a little bit into another concept, which is the light that was diminished, the symptom light, came in, then went into two streams, so to speak. One is called Soviv, one is called Limalik. And it's good. Again, it will give us some very fascinating insight in this topic called symptom, but all it's for the goal to understand how much God cares about us, to put this all into motion so we can have that relationship. Any questions?
I want to start.
So infinite or endless, it's like you walk into elevator on 4 sides with a mirror. It's endless. That's how it is. Do you understand, Rabbi, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if that's actually infinite at the end of the day.
But there is no end to it.
There is an answer because it doesn't look to us as an answer, but if the angles at one point come so much together, that's the end.
When your stop is the end.
Rita, there's no picture for infinity.
Yes,
The
you're
moment's
right.
a picture, it's not finite anymore.
Yes, I understand. It's so deep. Oh my God.
Yeah.
One life is not enough. Tzimtzum, how do we know about it?
How do we know about it?
Mhm.
It's in Torah. What do you mean? I told
I
you.
I know that with Moish, I know that story, but philosophically, how do we know that this is somebody had to come up with the concept?
No, so it's a good question. It's a good question. So the question the question of the answer is, where do we know all this information, right? Is that your question?
Yeah, part, yes. I know this. I know where you can take it from Torah. I know the place. I know what, but somebody
No,
had to
but
make it
but
available to us.
so that's exactly when we say the teaching of Kabbalah. Where does it originate from? It was taught by God Himself. Kabbalah is not a teaching that was invented by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Yes, I understand.
Right? So the teaching of Kabbalah is God's teaching. It's part what we want to call it the oral Torah, but it's all part of Torah itself. So the concept of Kabbalah and Tzimtzum, we have a book called what's it called? Correct. So exactly, Sefer Yetzirah. So Sefer Yetzirah is a book called Book of Creation.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, so it's one of the it's older than the Zohar, but the tradition is that it was written by none other than Adam himself. That Adam was taught by God, because God created Adam directly, all the secrets of the universe. And then, so maybe not the book itself was written, but the concept was given. Adam and Abraham and Abraham, Sarah, Rivka, they all had this information taught because they were communicating with Hashem. And then it was Moshe Rabbeinu. Then it was Yeshua, and then it was Shmuel Hanavi, and then it came down to David HaMelech, and so on. David HaMelech was a master Kabbalist. But they didn't write things because it was not permitted to be written down until when we come to the era of the Mishnah and the Talmud, when the written information, when the oral information was finally written down. That's why Rabbi Shimon wrote the Zohar. So it's not where do we know it from? Yeah, today we have references to that.
It's a huge, not for the.
But so I want to say, I want to finish with that. It's incredibly huge. It's incredibly incredibly powerful, and could be incredibly overwhelming. So when you in your journey, in your personal journey, you need to ask yourself, what is it that I would like to gain more depth of knowledge that is going to make me better understand my purpose and mission. It's going to make me a better person to fulfill Hashem's Torah. And studying Torah in itself is an obligation. Why? So in addition to the incredibly connection that we have with Hashem, but to know how to live life, to know how to live, Torah is our guidance and we need guidance every day and every moment. So it's not optional, It's a self-help book. You want to figure out the secrets of the universe and what's the values, so that you start looking into Torah. It's an obligation to study every single day. And just like you have your investment, there's got to be a portfolio in which you want to be diversified. You want your Torah learning also to be diversified. So because if somebody is only into one thing over the other, then not necessarily they're getting. In other words, the Torah is like an orchard, like a beautiful garden, right? Where you need to attend to in order for a garden to come together, you got to attend to many different things: the earth, the watering, this seed, and this tree, and this that. We have to peel back in our own personal journey as well, and peel back on the mosaic of Torah, mosaic of our life, and go deeper and deeper, so to speak. So don't sink into one concept. You know, guys, I'm going to study Tzimtzum for the next 5 years, and I don't want to learn anything else. So, knowing though that the teaching are out there, it exists, and today we have the ability to learn so much more than others never dreamt have the access to. You know, even in the very religious, observant Jews of about 50 to 100 years ago, people didn't have access to learning. The yeshivas, for example, was not a common. Most teenagers, not unless you went to yeshiva. They couldn't. It didn't even exist. A real yeshiva, that we have it today, and there's a school, there's a building, there's a school, there's a teacher, and there's a curriculum. Started mainly 200 years ago. If you look in the history, how did it work? It was parents, father taught the children. They had a little shul, a little shtibel, a cheder, and they would get together and learn. Before they knew it, they had to go work in the fields or go to the army. So there wasn't the ability to study much. Yeah, there was a prodigy, was a kid who was very smart. They would give him the best tutor, and they would kind of move him to become a big scholar and a rabbi. The especially Hasidic movement introduced the concept of mass education, mass Torah education, and even to combat a little bit, but also in secular education was the same thing, right? Who was educated 150 years ago back? Who was educated? Who had an education? Didn't exist the academies as we have today. So all of that I'm saying is, if you go to, I remember meeting people who were also who went through the war, but very Hasidic Jews, very Orthodox. We call them ultra Orthodox. With that, daven to every mitzvah, but they didn't know concepts. They never had the opportunity to learn. They didn't know. So they knew. Yeah, I know how to daven, put tefillin, I know how to keep Shabbos, but they never had the opportunity to learn. Some of them couldn't even read properly. So that's so my point is, we live in a very rich time of history. Everything's on our fingertips. Take what talks to you, and get yourself a good teacher, and
Rabbi, thank you for being our
problem.
teacher. We're very grateful for that. Really, you open up our horizon with God, and really, I appreciate that tremendously.
Same
Rabbi.
here. I feel blessed to have such special students like over here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
More fortunate.
Thank
I wish
you.
everyone a happy Shavuos. We have the way we wish each other for Shavuos. So in the Chabad world, there's a line the Rebbe wrote that when we on Shavuos we receive the Torah again, and it should be, I will translate, Kabbalat HaTorah, which means receiving of the Torah. It should be b'simcha, it should be with joy, b'pnimius, and it should be eternalized. The blessing we give, may the holiday be, may you experience the re-giving of the Torah, this energy that we're getting on Shavuos. It should be with joy and eternal.
Amen.
We will be, I will be giving a special session Shavuos night from 10 p.m. to midnight. and it's not going to be on Zoom. You got to come in person and show. And then on Friday, we're going to have services in the morning, also in the afternoon with the reading Ten Commandments, which is super important. The energy that we receive of receiving the Torah happens when we read from the Ten Commandments from a Torah scroll. Make it a great week.
Thank you, Rabbi. To you
Thank
too,
you.
and to everybody.
With us. Take care.